Welcome to another NintendoFuse Game Chat. This time around, we'll be talking Llamasoft, the Jeff Minter story. We got codes provided by Digital Eclipse to cover this review for all three of us. And this is like a little documentary style game where they give the history of Llamasoft and all the different games and he developed over the years, dating all the way back to the 1980s, and kind of documented how he got into the gaming in general. So I guess I can throw it over to Steve to see like how much of the documentary you got through and what you thought of it and what games that you tried out that were on there. There was quite a selection of different games and different events that they highlighted over the course of the years, and they had it like sorted through with some different chapters. So I
Yeah.
can let you go dive into that some more.
Yeah. It was it's a cool way of doing a game. I think we've touched about on our podcast that this is kind of like a pseudo sequel to Atari 50, and I think it's cool to see how they've incorporated this documentary and game collection all in one. And so you can go straight to the games and just play the games if you want to, but you can also take this journey through history and see clips of Jeff and others talking about Jeff and his game development and all these different things, which is really cool to kind of see some behind the scenes footage and hear the story behind the story and all that stuff. But it's also been pretty cool to be able to play through all these games in one collection as well. Not all the games play that well. Let's say that. Some of them translate better than others. There's sometimes that I'm like, I played Centipede, and I was like, I don't even know how to start this game. And then all of a sudden, I was like shooting, and I'm used to like the arcade version of Centipede or the more modern versions of Centipede, and wow, this version is rough. But it's cool to like see what that was and have it all in one collection. And yeah, I think it's a really cool way to do a documentary kind of style, especially a video game style. It makes sense to do it that way and kind of progress along and play the games that he's developing in this whole story, and it's kind of interactive. So yeah, I love the idea of what they've done here for sure. It's just some of the games don't really, translate that great to, 2024. But yeah, Barry, what'd you think?
Yeah, when I booted this up, I didn't know what to expect. And I went through the documentary. I was like, as a history buff, I loved this. I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I love a lot of the behind the scenes and being able to like look at the packaging and look at the ads and like all that stuff. I loved it. And it brought me back. It brought me back to those days because you know, I remember a lot of those ads. I remember seeing the rough graphics, as box art, like done in like print shop. And like that was the graphics that you did in your garage because you made this in your garage. It was a wild time for gaming, and it was a lot of fun, especially with those other systems. Obviously we love the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo and all that, but as much as I love the Nintendo, I didn't get one until sixth grade. I grew up with the Atari and the Commodore, and I saw Vic 20 and just seeing these box art. It just brought me back to that era, the early computer era, and just going through the documentary, I thought was really well done. It was really tasteful. It was very informative. And going through, I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to like play some of these, like he's talking about it. And then when I finished the documentary, I was like, oh wait, play. And I realized all the games are there. I'm like, holy crap, this is so cool. So I was able to go through and just have this, after reading about and seeing like some of the short clips and about like his different versions, and then of course porting, because back then porting wasn't as simple as pushing a button. It was a whole different system with a whole different specs, and you got a very different game out of it, and it was cool to be able to do that. And I do remember when Atari 50 came out that there was one game that people were really confused where it was, which is arguably the best game for the Atari Jaguar, which was Tempest.
Mm.
You know, Tempest 2000. And I was like, why would they put Tempest 2000 in there? And then when I booted this and I'm like, Oh, now I know why they didn't do it, because they saved it for this game. So of course that was the very first game I booted up, and Tempest 2000 is still just as awesome as it was back then. It was just so cool to be able to play that. And then I did, probably a mistake of mine, I did like Grid Runner, the remastered version, which was like the newest thing that they went back, and it was a lot of fun. And of course then I went back and played the original, because I'm like, well, now I've got to see, and boy, that was rough, like you said. And as I was going through, a lot of these games were rough. They were really,
Mhm.
they were my childhood. So now I look at them as rough. Back then, they were state of the art. They were fantastic. There was nothing else like it. And I remember playing a lot of games like this over and over and over again ad nauseum, because there was nothing else like it. And it was just fun. And I didn't know about 80-hour epic adventures. It was arcade games. That's what you played. You played these stupid little games that were very simple and a lot of fun. And naturally, in 2024, these games did not hold my attention like they would have in the 1980s. And so I played, a few rounds or whatever, and I was like, I got enough. I saw, I experienced, I'll move on. So I played a lot of the games, but I only played them in short little bits, because I was almost like, it was almost like a buffet. It was like table, testing and tasting all these different games. But to have them all at the touch of my fingertips, and a lot of them restored, like the early ones where stuff was restored. I was like, that's really cool that they went through and they restored these games that were potentially lost to time. So I'm really happy this exists.
Yeah, I definitely echo what you guys were saying. At least in terms of the documentary thing, I didn't really. The one thing I did take away from it is like you had to like actually click through on some of the actual objects. So, like I read like all the
Everything.
text and I'd finished like the entire timeline of chapter one, and that said like, oh, you're only like 50% through, and I'm like, I read every single word and every single text on the screen, and then it actually wanted you to like open up all of the little cassette things just at least bring it like zoom it in or whatever, and then like that is what triggered the completion percentage. And at least that part it kind of annoyed me a little bit, but obviously it's not a major detractor where it's like, oh my god, don't buy this game because of this little detail type thing. But yeah, I definitely agree with what you were saying, Barry. Some of these games don't really hold the stand of test of time, but it's still great to have everything there for like at least the historical context and importance and everything. Like these games were like some of the very original video games in the early 80s, and it's still great to be able to see like the history of video games in general and where it came from. I mean, a lot of people point to like Pong from the end of the 70s, and then like these are the games that kind of somewhat followed. So it's still great to be able to have these from this historical context, even if they don't aren't meant to be played in today's day and age with all the latest bells and whistles and graphics. So
Think it's just really cool how they've done this. I mean, because you're really getting not only a documentary that's a well done documentary, but you're also getting all this collection of games, and it's basically like a museum dedicated to all these games, a virtual museum, and there's a lot of content there, which is really cool when you start thinking about it. And when I started thinking about it, like a museum, it is basically what you said, Barry. Like if I were walking through a museum, I'm learning about Jeff Minter and his story. I would play each game maybe for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and then I move on to the next one. And if you treat it like that, that's exactly what it is. It's this virtual museum in your hands or on your TV.
Yeah, 100%. That's how I think you have to, because going back to some of those older games, I mean, some have certainly, stood the test of time, but not all of them. And not all of them, even though not all the versions, like Pac-Man, absolutely has stood the test of time. But the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man can go die in a fire. That's the worst version of Pac-Man ever. But it's interesting to see like what they did, and how they were able to port it, even if it's ported poorly. Just the fact that it exists. And that's what I like about this, is that it gives you all those different ports. Like in the documentary, he talks about, I had to port it to this system, and these are what I had to work with the system limitations and how I got around it. And you get to experience, hey, you could play both versions back to back and see the differences between them. And I think that's important, because we've had discussions about video game preservation, and about how even ports, for example, if a game gets ported by Nintendo to the Switch, that's great. You can play it, but it's still not the original version. Maybe it's missing a gimmick from a system like the Wii U with the control pad or a touchscreen of the DS. So it's technically not the same version anymore. And I like how this gives you all the versions of all those games, every game he worked on, and you can play them, like you said, at a museum. And I could see it being like an exhibit, walking around and testing it, because I don't think many people today would want to play them for longer periods of time, except for maybe like Tempest or like Gridmaster
Sure.
Remastered, because they're more modern.
All right, so currently at the time of this recording, it is priced at $29.99. So, Steve, would you recommend like the pick anyone to pick up this game?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah, for sure. I mean, if you enjoy like seeing games from the past and learning all that, absolutely. I mean, if it was just the games alone, that's 42 games for $30. That's less than $1 a game. And then if it was just the documentary, $30 for a solid documentary about a video game developer, absolutely. You're getting both in one. And all the other written content and images and all that stuff as well. So yeah, I think it's a great deal. $30 for all that content. Yeah, definitely.
I'm 100% going to echo. I mean, I would pay $30 just for a documentary. I paid that much for other documentaries in gaming history. So absolutely. And to have it be interactive, I think it's a fun way to learn the history too, the way they display the documentary. It's not like just putting on a 3 hour long documentary and sitting there watching people talk. Sure, there are clips and videos that do that, but to be able to look at the packaging and rotate it and feel like you're there and see the screenshots and see the ads and see the here's where the studio was and see like the location kind of puts you there. It's more than a documentary, it's a museum, and I think for $30 alone that is worth it. But like Steve said, you're getting over 40 games. You get to play these games in full, fully restored, all at the touch of a button. Like, yeah, that's awesome. There's a lot of content here, especially if you enjoy the history and you enjoy older games, for sure.
yeah, I definitely agree with both of you. I would give this a very strong recommendation. It's almost basically the price of a a museum pass. So then, like, you're essentially get to always look it up and load it whenever you want, and then you can take and go. You can play it like for whatever 8 hours one night and just go through the entire museum and still play through all the games, and then you can still always boot it up at some point in the future to like experience it again and kind of just buff up your knowledge on it. So I definitely agree with you guys. I don't know if like they could have toned it down to like make the rating a little bit less than an M rated version of the game because it's just due to strong language. But I definitely would still recommend like to anyone in that nature. I mean, language is always a part of the thing these days, and but that's not a way to turn away from seeing some great history and seeing where video games came from. So. Um, if you guys like this game chat, be sure to tune into NintendoFuse.com for more information. We also check out our YouTube page where we have our podcast and industry talks and more. So take care, guys, and we'll see you next time.